A lot of people still imagine prepping as some extreme lifestyle. Bunkers in the woods, stockpiles of ammunition, generators running in the middle of nowhere. But most real emergencies in America don't look like that. They look like empty shelves before a winter storm. A power outage that lasts longer than anyone expected. A hurricane that shuts down gas stations for days. A job loss that hits at the same time grocery prices jump again. I've spent time in disaster zones after major storms, and one thing becomes obvious very quickly. Modern life is far more fragile than most people realize. The systems we depend on every day, power, transportation, grocery deliveries, digital payments, work incredibly well, right up until they don't. And when those systems start struggling, even temporarily, people panic fast. The families who handle those situations best usually aren't the richest or the most extreme. They're the ones who prepared early, stayed practical, and slowly built supplies before everyone else started rushing to the store. That's what this video is about. Not fantasy survival scenarios. Not end-of-the-world predictions. Just 15 practical items experienced preppers consistently buy in bulk because they solve real problems during real emergencies. Some are inexpensive. Some are surprisingly overlooked, but every item on this list becomes harder to find once a crisis starts. We're counting down from number 15 to number 1, and the higher we go, the more important these items become. And by the end of this video, you'll probably look at your pantry, your garage, and your emergency supplies very differently. Number 15, heirloom seeds. Food. You can regrow. Most people think preparedness starts and ends with stored food. And to be fair, having extra food on hand matters. But stored food only moves in one direction. Eventually, it gets used up. Seeds are different. A good set of heirloom seeds gives you the ability to keep producing food season after season. Unlike many hybrid seeds sold in big box stores, heirloom varieties are open-pollinated, which means you can save seeds from one harvest and plant them again the following year. That matters more than most people realize. A single tomato plant can produce dozens and sometimes hundreds of tomatoes over a growing season. One packet of seeds can turn into an ongoing food source if you know how to grow and save them properly. And historically, Americans used to understand this very well. During World War II, millions of families planted what were called victory gardens. Backyards, vacant lots, and small community plots helped supplement the food supply across the country. Growing food wasn't considered a hobby back then. It was normal household resilience. Today, most people have completely lost that skill. The advantage of heirloom seeds isn't just cost savings. It's independence. Even a small garden gives you options when supply chains get unreliable or grocery prices spike. You don't need acres of farmland to start. A few buckets, raised beds, or a small backyard garden is enough to begin learning now. While mistakes are still cheap and conditions are still normal, because once shelves start emptying, everyone suddenly decides they want seeds at the exact same time. But growing food won't help much if you can't keep basic devices powered during an outage. That's where item number 14 becomes important. Number 14. Solar generators and battery banks. Quiet power. When the grid goes down, most people still think of emergency power as a loud gas generator sitting in the driveway. And those generators absolutely have their place. But there's one problem people tend to forget. Fuel. After major storms, fuel disappears fast. Gas stations lose power. Delivery trucks stop running normally. Long lines form almost immediately. And suddenly people are burning through gasoline faster than they can replace it. That's one reason portable solar generators have become so popular over the last few years. A mid-sized power station paired with a foldable solar panel can quietly keep essential devices running for days without needing fuel deliveries or constant maintenance. Phones, radios, medical devices, fans, flashlights, and emergency lighting all become much easier to manage during an outage. And unlike traditional generators, solar systems don't advertise themselves to the entire neighborhood every time they turn on. During the Texas winter storm in 2021, many families discovered that backup power only works as long as fuel remains available. Some gas stations couldn't even pump fuel because the stations themselves had lost electricity. Solar setups aren't perfect, and they won't run an entire house indefinitely. But that's not really the point. The goal isn't comfort. The goal is stability. A reliable source of quiet backup power buys you time, flexibility, and options while other people are scrambling to recharge phones inside grocery stores and parking lots. And in most emergencies, having options matters more than having the biggest setup. Of course, power doesn't solve much if you can't actually access or prepare your food. That's why item number 13 is one of the most overlooked supplies on this list. Number 13. Manual tools and can openers. The things people forget until it's too late. Most modern homes are built around electricity. People don't really notice it during normal life. But the moment the power goes out, simple everyday tasks suddenly become much harder. Opening food, cooking, making repairs. Even basic household maintenance starts turning into a problem. And that's usually when people realize they depended on powered tools for almost everything. One of the easiest examples is the electric can opener. Millions of Americans have one sitting in the kitchen right now. Works perfectly until the lights go out. Then suddenly there's canned food everywhere and no easy way to open it. That's why experienced preppers tend to keep simple manual backups for the things they use most. A basic hand-operated can opener costs only a few dollars and lasts for years. Many people also keep small military-style P38 can openers attached to keychains, emergency bags, or glove compartments because they're compact, durable, and almost impossible to break. The same logic applies to tools. A small manual toolkit, hammer, screwdrivers, adjustable wrench, handsaw, duct tape, work gloves, can solve an incredible number of problems during an outage or emergency. None of it requires fuel, batteries, Wi-Fi, or charging cables. And historically, simple tools tend to outperform complicated ones during long disruptions. After major hurricanes and winter storms, it's usually not advanced gear that helps people most. It's basic equipment that still works when everything else stops working. Because in a real emergency, reliability matters more than convenience. But even the best equipment becomes less useful if you don't know what's happening around you. That's why item number 12 matters far more than most people think. Number 12. NOAA Weather Radio. Information when everything else goes quiet. Most people assume their phones will keep them informed during an emergency, and most of the time they do. But during large disasters, communication systems become overloaded surprisingly fast. Cell towers lose power, networks slow down, internet service becomes unreliable. And once phone batteries start dying, people lose access to information almost completely. That's usually when confusion starts spreading. One rumor turns into 10. Nobody knows which roads are closed, where supplies are available, or whether evacuation orders are real. In stressful situations, bad information can become just as dangerous as the emergency itself. That's why a simple NOAA weather radio is still one of the most valuable emergency tools you can own. A good battery-powered or hand-crank radio gives you continuous access to emergency broadcasts, weather alerts, evacuation updates, and disaster information, even when phones and internet service fail. Many models also include flashlights, USB charging ports, and solar charging panels built into the unit. And unlike smartphones, they were specifically designed for disaster conditions. After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, millions of people across the Northeast lost power and communication access for days. But NOAA emergency broadcasts continued operating throughout the crisis, providing updates that many residents couldn't get anywhere else. The people who stayed informed generally made better decisions sooner. And that's really what emergency preparedness is about. Not panic, not fear. Just having reliable information early enough to stay ahead of problems instead of reacting to them at the last minute. Because when everybody else is guessing, accurate information becomes incredibly valuable. Of course, information only helps if you actually know what to do with it. That's where item number 11 comes in. Number 11. Physical books and offline knowledge. Skills that still work without internet. Most people don't realize how dependent they've become on instant access to information. Need directions? Use your phone? Need medical advice? Search online? Need repair instructions? Watch a video. And under normal conditions, that's incredibly convenient. But during a prolonged outage or major emergency, that entire system can disappear overnight. No internet means no search engine, no tutorials, no cloud storage, and sometimes no communication at all. That's why experienced preppers still value physical books and offline knowledge. A good survival library doesn't need to be huge. A few carefully chosen references can cover an enormous range of problems. Basic first aid, water purification, gardening, food preservation, navigation, emergency repairs, and long-term storage techniques. Many people start with practical resources like first aid manuals, regional road atlases, gardening guides, and military survival handbooks because they're designed to solve real-world problems under difficult conditions. And physical books have one major advantage digital devices don't. They never need batteries. Even simple printed maps become extremely valuable when GPS systems fail or cell service disappears. After hurricanes and wildfires, plenty of people discover that navigation becomes much harder once their phones stop updating in real time. The same goes for medical information. In stressful situations, people forget things surprisingly quickly. Having clear written instructions nearby can prevent small mistakes from becoming serious problems. Preparedness isn't only about storing supplies, it's also about storing knowledge, because tools wear out, batteries die, networks fail. But useful skills and reliable information continue working long after the power goes out. Of course, knowledge alone won't buy necessities during a disruption. And that's why item number 10 still matters more than many people expect. Number 10. Cash in small bills. The backup system people forget about. Most Americans barely use physical cash anymore. Everything runs through cards, banking apps, tap-to-pay systems, and online transfers. Under normal conditions, it's fast, convenient, and easy to take for granted until the system stops working. During major outages, payment networks can fail almost immediately. Card readers go offline. ATMs stop working. Banks close early. Even stores that still have supplies sometimes can't process digital payments. And that's when people suddenly realize how dependent modern life is on electricity and internet access. That's why many experienced preppers keep a small reserve of physical cash at home, especially smaller bills like 5s, 10s, and 20s, not huge amounts, just enough to handle fuel, groceries, transportation, or emergency purchases if digital systems temporarily go down. Because in many disasters, cash still works long after technology doesn't. After Hurricane Katrina, countless residents found themselves unable to access money electronically for days and sometimes weeks. People carrying cash were often able to buy food, fuel, hotel rooms, and basic necessities, while others waited for systems to come back online. And smaller bills matter for a simple reason. During emergencies, businesses often can't make change easily. Nobody wants to hand over a $100 bill for a case of water if the register barely works. The point isn't fear or distrust of banks. It's redundancy. Preparedness works best when you have backup systems for critical parts of daily life: power, water, food, communication, and yes, even payment methods. Because when normal systems become unreliable, simple old-fashioned solutions suddenly become valuable again. But in a long emergency, some everyday items can become even more useful than cash itself. That's where item number 9 gets surprisingly interesting. Number 9. Reading glasses and small barter items. The supplies nobody thinks about when people imagine barter during a crisis. They usually picture dramatic things: fuel, ammunition, expensive gear, or giant stockpiles of food. But real-world shortages often work differently. In extended emergencies, the most valuable items are frequently the small, everyday things people suddenly realize they can't replace anymore. Reading glasses are a perfect example. Millions of Americans rely on them every single day, especially adults over 40. But very few people keep backups. And during a supply chain disruption, something as simple as losing or breaking a pair can turn into a serious problem fast. Trying to read medication instructions, maps, repair manuals, or food labels becomes much harder when you can't see clearly. That's why inexpensive reading glasses are one of the most overlooked preparedness items you can buy in bulk. They're lightweight, compact, inexpensive, and useful to an enormous number of people. A few extra pairs in different strengths take up almost no space, but can become incredibly valuable during a long disruption. The same idea applies to other simple household items: lighters, bar soap, sewing kits, batteries, toothpaste, multivitamins, work gloves. None of these seem dramatic during normal times. But after disasters, basic necessities disappear from shelves much faster than people expect. And historically, small comfort and hygiene items often become some of the most traded supplies during difficult conditions. Because people continue needing them every single day, preparedness isn't always about massive stockpiles. Sometimes it's simply about noticing the ordinary things people depend on, right before they become hard to find. And speaking of things people underestimate, item number 8 has probably saved more lives throughout history than almost anything else on this list. Number 8. Bleach and cleaning supplies. The unglamorous supplies that save lives. When people think about emergency preparedness, sanitation usually isn't the first thing that comes to mind. Most people focus on food, weapons, fuel, or generators. But historically, disease and contaminated water have caused far more suffering during disasters than violence ever did, and it doesn't take long for sanitation problems to appear once normal services stop functioning. Trash piles up. Water becomes questionable. Toilets stop working properly. Minor cuts get infected. Things that seem manageable during the first couple of days can become serious health risks surprisingly fast. That's why basic cleaning supplies matter so much. Unscented household bleach, disinfectants, trash bags, gloves, soap, and simple hygiene products can help prevent problems that become very difficult to deal with later. Even ordinary bleach has multiple emergency uses when stored properly. It can disinfect surfaces, help sanitize contaminated water in certain situations, and reduce the spread of illness inside crowded households or shelters. And unlike many preparedness products marketed online, these supplies are inexpensive and easy to rotate through normal daily use. History shows the same pattern over and over again. After earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, and large-scale power outages, public health problems often become more dangerous than the original disaster itself. Once clean water and waste management systems begin failing, infection spreads quickly. The families that stay healthiest are usually the ones that maintain the cleanest environments. Preparedness isn't only about surviving dramatic moments. It's also about avoiding preventable problems in the weeks afterward. And sometimes the supplies that matter most are the least exciting ones, sitting quietly in the cleaning aisle. Of course, keeping your environment clean is only part of the equation. Personal hygiene matters just as much, and that's exactly why item number 7 disappears from store shelves almost immediately during every major emergency. Number 7. Hygiene and toilet paper. The first supplies people panic buy. If the last few years proved anything, it's how quickly everyday household items can disappear once people start feeling uncertain. Most Americans still remember walking into stores during 2020 and seeing entire aisles completely empty. Toilet paper, soap, disinfectants, paper towels, gone almost overnight. And the interesting part is that it wasn't caused by a complete collapse. It was mostly panic buying and supply chain delays. That's an important lesson. Modern stores don't keep months of inventory sitting in the back. Most products are constantly moving through tightly managed delivery systems. When demand suddenly spikes, shelves empty much faster than people expect. That's why experienced preppers usually focus on slowly building extra supplies of the items households use every single day. Toilet paper, soap, toothpaste, feminine hygiene products, laundry detergent, dish soap, trash bags. Not because these things are dramatic, because running out of them makes daily life miserable very quickly. And hygiene problems have a way of lowering morale fast during stressful situations. People handle emergencies better when they can still maintain basic routines and personal cleanliness. The good news is that these supplies are easy to build up gradually. Buying one extra package during normal shopping trips barely affects your budget, but over time it creates a buffer that protects you from shortages, inflation, or temporary disruptions. And unlike specialized survival gear, none of it goes to waste. You'll use it eventually anyway. Preparedness doesn't always mean preparing for extreme scenarios. Sometimes it simply means making sure your household can stay comfortable and functional during a difficult month. But staying clean only matters if you can also stay warm and cook food when the power is out. That's where item number 6 becomes extremely important. Number 6. Propane and backup cooking. The ability to make a hot meal. Most people don't realize how dependent modern kitchens are on electricity until the power actually goes out. Even homes with gas stoves often rely on electric ignition systems, electronic controls, or ventilation components that stop working during outages. And once that happens, something as basic as boiling water suddenly becomes difficult. That's why backup cooking matters so much. A simple propane camp stove can completely change the way a family experiences a blackout. Instead of eating cold canned food in the dark, you can still cook meals, boil water, make coffee, and maintain some sense of normal routine. And during stressful situations, that matters more than people expect. Hot food improves morale. It helps people stay calm. It creates a sense of stability, especially for children and older family members. Propane also has one major advantage over gasoline: long-term storage. Properly stored propane cylinders remain usable for years without the degradation problems gasoline has. You don't need stabilizers, rotation schedules, or complicated maintenance routines. That's one reason propane became so valuable after major storms like Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Ian. Families with backup cooking setups were able to keep functioning much more comfortably while waiting for utilities to recover. And the setup itself doesn't need to be complicated. A basic 2-burner propane stove, a few extra fuel canisters, matches, and a safe outdoor cooking area are enough for most households to handle short-term outages very effectively. Preparedness is often less about dramatic survival skills and more about preserving ordinary daily routines under difficult conditions. And few things restore a sense of normalcy faster than being able to cook a warm meal when everything else feels uncertain. Of course, cooking after dark becomes a lot harder if you can't see what you're doing. That's why item number 5 is one of the most practical upgrades you can make. Number 5. Batteries, headlamps, and lighting. Small tools that make a huge difference. Most people keep a flashlight somewhere in the house and assume that's enough. Then the power goes out, and suddenly everyone is searching drawers for dead batteries while trying not to trip over furniture in the dark. Lighting problems become frustrating very quickly. And after a few hours without electricity, people realize how difficult ordinary tasks become when you can't properly see what you're doing. Cooking, cleaning, checking breakers, helping children, treating injuries, even walking through your own house starts becoming more stressful than it should be. That's why experienced preppers usually focus on layered lighting instead of relying on a single flashlight. Headlamps are especially useful because they keep both hands free. That may not sound important until you're trying to cook dinner, carry supplies, repair equipment, or help someone medically during a blackout. There's a reason hikers, mechanics, emergency workers, and military personnel rely on them constantly. They're practical. Battery storage matters too. AA and AAA batteries power a huge number of emergency devices: radios, flashlights, thermometers, small fans, medical equipment, and portable lighting. Keeping a reasonable supply at home removes a major source of stress during longer outages. Candles and lanterns can also help, but modern LED lighting is far safer, brighter, and more efficient than most people realize. A small headlamp can run for dozens or even hundreds of hours on a single set of batteries. And psychologically, good lighting matters more than people expect. Darkness increases stress. It makes homes feel unsafe and chaotic. Reliable lighting restores a sense of control. Sometimes preparedness isn't about dramatic survival gear at all. Sometimes it's simply about making difficult situations feel manageable. But even with light, supplies, and preparation, medical problems can still turn ordinary emergencies into dangerous ones very quickly. That's why item number 4 deserves serious attention. Number 4. First aid and OTC medications. The supplies people always wish they had more of. Most households have some version of a first aid kit. Usually it's a small plastic box with a few bandages, expired pain relievers, and half-used ointment packets pushed into the back of a bathroom cabinet. That works for minor everyday problems. But during a prolonged emergency, medical issues tend to become more common at the exact same time. Healthcare becomes harder to access. Pharmacies close early. Clinics become overloaded. Emergency rooms fill up, and small problems that would normally be easy to treat suddenly become much more serious. That's why experienced preppers focus heavily on basic medical supplies and over-the-counter medications: pain relievers, fever reducers, antihistamines, antidiarrheal medication, electrolyte powders, cold medicine, wound cleaning supplies, gauze, medical tape, gloves. These are the items families consistently use during stressful situations. And unlike dramatic survival gear, medical supplies solve problems people actually encounter all the time: cuts, burns, infections, dehydration. Allergic reactions. Fevers during Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, many communities spent weeks with limited access to pharmacies and medical care. People quickly learned how important even simple medications could become. When resupply systems stopped functioning normally, the goal isn't to replace a hospital, it's to handle common problems safely enough to avoid needing one whenever possible. And medical preparedness also creates peace of mind. Knowing you can treat minor illnesses and injuries at home reduces panic and gives families more flexibility during uncertain situations, because in real emergencies, comfort matters, pain management matters, basic healthcare matters, and the households that prepare for those realities usually handle crises far better than the ones focused only on dramatic survival scenarios. Of course, medicine only helps if your body is getting the nutrients it needs to stay functional long-term. That's why item number 3 is much more important than most people realize. Number 3. Multivitamins. The nutritional gap most people forget about when people build emergency food supplies. They usually focus on one thing first: calories, and that makes sense. Rice, beans, pasta, canned foods, and shelf-stable meals are all excellent preparedness staples because they're affordable, filling, and store well for long periods. But there's another side to nutrition that often gets ignored: micronutrients. In short-term emergencies, vitamin deficiencies usually aren't a major issue. But during longer disruptions, especially when diets become repetitive, nutritional gaps can start affecting energy levels, immune function, mood, and overall health much faster than people expect. History has shown this repeatedly. Sailors on long voyages developed scurvy from lack of vitamin C. Soldiers in prolonged campaigns struggled with nutrient deficiencies when food variety disappeared. Even modern disaster zones often see health problems worsen when people rely heavily on processed emergency foods for extended periods. That's one reason many experienced preppers keep multivitamins as part of their long-term supplies. They're inexpensive, compact, easy to store, and help fill nutritional gaps when fresh foods become harder to access regularly. Vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, and electrolyte supplements are also commonly stored because they support functions the body relies on heavily during stress, illness, poor sleep, and physically demanding conditions. And unlike specialized survival products, most vitamins are things people can rotate through normal daily life anyway. The point isn't perfect nutrition, it's stability. A simple bottle of multivitamins won't solve every health problem, but over time it can help support energy, immunity, and overall resilience when diets become limited or inconsistent. And during difficult situations, small advantages add up surprisingly fast. But even the best food and nutrition plans fall apart quickly without one critical resource. That's why item number 2 is the foundation of everything else on this list. Number 2. Water storage and filtration. The one resource you cannot go without. Most people dramatically underestimate how much water they actually use every day. Not just for drinking, but for cooking, cleaning, hygiene, washing dishes, flushing toilets, and basic daily life. When water service stops, even temporarily, households feel the pressure almost immediately. And unlike food shortages, water problems become dangerous very quickly. The human body can handle reduced food intake for quite a while. Dehydration is different. Within a day or two, energy levels drop, decision-making gets worse, and physical performance starts declining fast. That's why water is the foundation of every serious preparedness plan. Experienced preppers usually approach it in layers. First comes stored water, enough for drinking and basic household use during short-term outages. Large refillable containers, food-grade water jugs, and stackable storage systems all work well if rotated properly. Second comes filtration. Portable water filters like the Sawyer Squeeze or Life Straw allow people to safely process water from questionable sources if normal systems fail for longer periods. Even a small filter can provide enormous peace of mind during uncertain situations. And third comes backup purification methods like unscented bleach or water purification tablets, in case filtration alone isn't enough. History has shown how fragile water infrastructure can become after disasters. Floods, winter storms, hurricanes, contamination events, and power failures have all left communities without safe water for days, weeks, and sometimes longer. And when that happens, bottled water disappears from stores almost immediately. The families who handle those situations best are usually the ones who prepared before everyone else started panicking. Because when clean water becomes difficult to find, almost every other preparedness item suddenly becomes less important. And that leads directly to the number one item. The simple foundation that makes long-term preparedness affordable, practical, and sustainable for almost any household. Number 1. Rice, beans, and canned foods. The foundation most people overlook when most people start preparing for emergencies. They immediately get pulled toward expensive survival products, freeze-dried meal kits, tactical food buckets, complicated gear marketed with dramatic packaging and end-of-the-world advertising. But historically, families survive hard times the same way they've always survived them, with simple, affordable staple foods stored consistently over time. Rice, beans, oats, pasta, canned meat, canned vegetables, peanut butter. Shelf-stable basics that ordinary households already know how to cook and eat. It isn't flashy. That's exactly why it works. A large bag of white rice stores for years when packaged properly, and provides an enormous number of calories for very little money. Dried beans add protein, fiber, and long-term nutrition at a fraction of the cost of specialty survival foods. And canned foods provide convenience, variety, and familiarity during stressful situations when comfort matters more than people realize. The real advantage of this approach is scalability. Most families can gradually build a very solid emergency food reserve simply by buying a little extra during normal grocery trips. No huge upfront investment, no dramatic lifestyle changes, just consistency. And unlike trendy preparedness products, these are foods people already rotate through everyday life. Historically, simple staple foods have carried populations through wars, economic depressions, supply shortages, and natural disasters all over the world. Not because they're exciting, because they're reliable. Preparedness doesn't have to look extreme. Often, it looks like a well-stocked pantry, built slowly and intentionally over time. Because when grocery shelves start thinning out and supply chains become unpredictable, the families with basic food reserves aren't panicking. They're simply continuing life with fewer disruptions than everyone else. At the end of the day, preparedness isn't really about fear. It's about reducing unnecessary stress when life becomes unpredictable. Most emergencies people experience aren't movie scenarios. They're power outages, severe storms, job losses, supply shortages, rising costs, and temporary disruptions that make ordinary life harder for a while. And the families who handle those situations best are usually the ones who prepared quietly before there was a reason to panic. You don't need to buy everything on this list overnight. Start small. Pick 1 or 2 areas where your household is most vulnerable and improve them gradually. A little extra food, a backup water supply, basic medical supplies, reliable lighting. Small steps add up faster than people think, because preparedness is really just another form of stability, and in uncertain times, stability becomes incredibly valuable. If you found this video helpful, share it with someone who would benefit from it. And if you'd like to see more practical preparedness content like this, stick around for the next video. Stay safe, stay prepared, and I'll see you next time.